Soul is yet another Pixar film to personify abstract concepts, visualize the unimaginable, and dramatize some of the most complex mysteries of life itself. And yet, the premise of the movie is so perfectly simple, everyone can immediately relate to it. Contrast that with the other huge franchise film released a few weeks ago, and you can see why one works and the other, well, doesn't. Pixar is a haven for storytellers and animators, and their track record speaks for itself. Every Pixar film is the byproduct of multiple writers breaking down themes, workshopping story beats, rounding out characters, and most importantly, ironing out the core premise. Now remember, a film's premise is the concrete idea that drives the story. Here are the premises for Soul and Wonder Woman 1984. At first glance, these are very similar, but if you look closer, you can spot some key differences. In The Art of Dramatic Writing, author Lejos Egri says that a film's premise has to contain character, conflict, and resolution. To unpack what he means by that, let's analyze the premises of Soul and Wonder Woman 1984 through the lens of character, conflict, and resolution. The character of Soul's premise is Joe Gardner. Joe dreams of being a professional jazz musician. He deems it his life's purpose. But it's a dream left unrealized as he teaches middle school band. Right away, you can see how effective this character is as a lead in a story. He's not only driven, but he's also driven by a goal that anyone in the audience can relate to. Who hasn't felt like they failed to accomplish their big dreams? We root for Joe not only because he wants something, but because he wants something that we all want as well. Our hearts beam when he secures his big gig, and then scream, "No!" as he falls down the manhole and dies. This kind of effective characterization only comes as a byproduct of a clear, concise premise. Diana's character, on the other hand, has a split desire in Wonder Woman 1984. She wants Steve back, wants to keep the world safe, and wants to honor the truth, whatever that means. You can already see how this muddles up and dilutes the story. And the moment in the film where the conflict is tied to character, when Diana has to say goodbye to Steve, it's 2/3 of the way through the movie. By widening the focus of the story, making the Wishing Stone a global event, and thereby fracturing Diana's character desire, Wonder Woman 1984's premise ends up contradicting its own themes. As is, the film insinuates that everyone in the world, if given a wish, will resort to selfish means, while simultaneously trying to teach Diana that the world is full of truth and goodness. So which one is it? Wonder Woman 84 should have kept the story focused on Diana's faults, that she, a person of beauty, power, and privilege, is too focused on what she doesn't have. Which brings us to Steve and 22. Notice, both films have more than one character in the premise. Like so many of Pixar's best films, Soul is a buddy picture. Our main character is joined by a pre-born soul named 22. 22 is stuck in the U seminar because she hasn't found her spark, or the thing that makes her want to live. And she can't be born on Earth until she finds it. Nothing her mentors throw at her feels worth devoting her life to, so 22 remains content to just stay at the U seminar for eternity, goofing off and tormenting a litany of Earth's finest souls. 22 is a character so dissatisfied with the pursuit of purpose that she will literally prevent her life from happening in order to stay away from it. While Joe is a character who wants purpose so badly, he will literally put his life at risk to attain it. Notice how those characters have opposite goals, but the same need. This is a brilliant way to underline a theme and to keep your story concise and focused. In Wonder Woman 84, Diana is reunited with Steve, which is great for her. And while he's kinda helpful in a fight and a mighty fine pilot, having Steve back really only fulfills one of her character desires. She could have easily kept the world safe without him, and she ultimately does. He really only exists in the movie so that she can sacrifice him later. And this doesn't work because the internal conflict is not tied to the main threat of the film, which leaves the conflict feeling manufactured instead of natural, like in Soul. We've already looked at the internal conflict of having to sacrifice her man, but what about the conflict caused by the villains? Diana wants to keep the world safe, and one man and Cheetah plan to wipe it out in a quest for power. Sure, the stakes there are kinda high. Kinda. But they have no foundation in Diana's character. Diana would try to stop them no matter what their plan was, which is probably why the writers had to add Steve. But once she sacrifices Steve, the movie really just becomes, watch me save the day. Which is fun, I guess, but not emotionally satisfying. And beyond that, the conflict between Diana and Cheetah, once again, accidentally shoots itself in the thematic foot. Instead of having Cheetah learn the same lesson as Diana, that she is already a powerful and strong woman who just wasn't aware of it, the movie has Diana telling Cheetah, basically, you don't know what you're asking for wanting to be like me. Which basically communicates the opposite message. Just stay nerdy and friendless, it's better that way. The premise of Pete Docter's Soul, on the other hand, creates tension between the pursuit of a goal and the pursuit of life. This is why Pixar's themes make so many grown men cry, because they pursue the conflict and emotion inherent in ideas, and not just the ideas themselves. It's no wonder, then, that the conflict between our protagonists feels so organic. The groundwork has already been laid out in the premise and in their respective desires. There's no scenario where these characters exist in the same space and don't butt heads. Egri writes, such iron-willed characters, driven by a well-understood and clearly defined premise, cannot help but lift the play to the highest pitch. A strong, tension-filled premise will create dynamic, well-motivated characters which lead to organic conflict. Each part leads to the next, to the next, to the next, like dominoes. Which, finally, leads us to the resolution is the premise fully realized within the story. You can get away with a vague premise for 2/3 of your movie through entertaining action and moments of humor, but your ending will always suffer. In the beginning, we see Diana as a young girl trying to cheat to win, and she is told,
no true hero is born from lies.
And later in the film, she is confronted with that same temptation to cheat to win by keeping Steve around. But she ultimately does let him go. And in what is meant to be a rousing conclusion, she restates that theme about truth to motivate all the people around the world to rescind their wishes. Okay, so far so good. But the rest of the film seems like it goes out of its way to highlight other themes. Themes like loners missing out on life should start living. We shouldn't treat people poorly or it will come back to bite us. The only love we really need is the love of our family. You really only see the main theme about truth 3 times. It's so infrequent and mixed that by the end you're left scratching your head. By the end of Joe's body-swapping, universe-bending journey, he realizes that pleasure and pain are only separated by a thin veil, both brought on by obsession. His conflict leads him face to face with the idea that expecting one thing to fix your life will only set you up for disappointment. So why doesn't the movie end with Joe talking to Dorothea outside the club? He's learned his lesson by that point, right? Well, yes, but he hasn't made a change. He hasn't learned the why. A weaker premise would lead the story there, and the movie would feel incomplete because the driving theme isn't a fully formed, compelling thought. But this is where Joe and 22 having different desires yet similar needs comes into play. By watching 22 literally walk in his shoes, he gains perspective on his own life. He gets an objective view on how his obsession has led him to overlook all the normal, everyday pleasures of life. Learning more about a friend, smelling the air, eating a pizza, helping students in times of need, watching a seed dance in the air. He learns that obsessing over purpose is wrong, and he learns why. Because it prevents him from living in the moment and experiencing the pleasure already present in his life. At the same time, 22 learns that having a specific purpose isn't what's important in life. What's important is having a spark for life itself. And we learn through watching Soul that it's one thing to live a life driven by purpose, and quite another and better thing to have a purpose driven by the pursuit of life. This is why Pixar delivers tearjerker after tearjerker. They consistently base their stories on compelling, fully formed premises and themes that have character, conflict, and resolution in mind. Just like Joe, writers can easily rush through their story, never stopping to make sure there's substance underneath the form. A good premise is like a preborn soul. You can't send it out into the world until it gains all of its badges, until it becomes a complete, fully thought out idea, one filled with character, conflict, and resolution. Otherwise, it has no spark.